I like paying my taxes. With them, I buy civilization. It's not my words, as you may have guessed. The words of Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., an American judge in the 30s. I like paying my taxes. With them, I buy civilization. I think it's a great phrase, because I think it sums up the welfare state. The post-war Labour government bill, it was an attempt to create a more civilised society, a better society, provided a guarantee against poverty, a minimum living standard if you're unemployed, seriously ill or incapacitated, and when you retire, and it provided a right to be housed. Fast forward 65 years, and in 2010, the UK government spent £188 billion on welfare, 28% of government expenditure, the biggest single item. Now, 34 billion of that was on children and families, 5 billion on benefits for unemployed people, 42 billion on benefits for low incomes, for people with low incomes, 78 billion, the biggest amount, as Kevin said, on pensions and benefits for retired people, and 29 billion on benefits for sick and disabled people. Lots of money being spent, and I do want to come on to actually how I think that could be reduced in a socially just way. Kevin touched on it, but I want to sort of just draw a bit more out of that. But first, what I wanted to do is just bust a few of the myths about welfare. And the first one, and I think Andy alluded to it very well in his opening speech, is that welfare benefits are generous. If you're unemployed today, unemployment benefit, job seekers allowance as it's known, is £71 a week. That's £10 a day. If you're reckless enough to be under 25, you know, stupid though that might be, you get 20% less. Now, I've never been able to figure that out, because I remember being 25, believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago. About 8 years now, but I don't remember going into shops and them saying, oh, you're under 25, I have a 20% discount. So why is it that they think people who are under 25 and now under 35 for housing benefit purposes can get by cheaper? Because I've never worked it out, but there we are. If unemployment benefit as well, because people have this idea that the welfare state's got more generous over the years, but if unemployment benefit had risen at the same rate as average earnings since 1979, then today it would be worth £110 a week. Job seekers allowance would be £110 a week. It didn't, it rose in line with CPI inflation, the lowest rate of inflation measure. So that £110 a week, compare that with the £56 somebody under 25 gets for unemployment benefit, and actually in 1979 they would have got nearly double. And bear in mind there's 1 million young people unemployed today. So, but it's not just unemployment benefit, take pensions as well. The basic state pension in the UK is worth 17% of average earnings. In Germany, it's 70%. In France, it's 60%. And even in the US, the full basic state pension is 40%. So it's pitifully low poverty levels of benefits in this country. The other thing about this benefit cap, which again has been touched on already, government said it's going to cut the benefits of 67,000 families who are getting over £26,000 a year. They're not. On the face of it, they are. They're not. It's going to wealthy landlords. That's who it's going to. They're not pocketing it at all. Housing Minister Grant Shapps, very posh chap from the home counties, said last month, I'll quote, "It can't be right to have people on housing benefit living on streets which hard-working families cannot afford to live on." Now, you hear that and it sort of just goes over your head, but just listen to it again. It can't be right to have people on housing benefit living on streets which hard-working families can't afford to live on. There's two problems with that, Grant. One is, where are they going to live? You know, what streets are there? There should be sort of ghettoised streets where people on benefits live. Is this what he wants? You know, detention centres, you know, maybe we can't afford to build them, so just campsites, sort of refugee camp arrangement. What is it, Grant? Where should they live? That's what I want to ask. And secondly, is the fact that 93% of people who claimed housing benefit in the last 2 years are employed. They are hard-working families. They are hard-working individuals even, heaven forbid. I don't know why we have to use this hard-working families phrase. It's one of my bête noirs, really. But you have to ask, why is it that 93% of people who claimed housing benefit in the last couple of years are in work? And I'll tell you why, it's because where I live in London, the average rent is £1,032 a month. That's the average. That includes studio flats, one-bedroom flats, not family homes. The average for a family home is now over 20 grand a year. For a 3-bedroom house in London to rent, £20,000 is the average across all London boroughs. In more than half of London boroughs, Londoners are paying more than 50% of their income on housing costs. Absolutely extortionate. And I'll come back to a bit more about that. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is who gets benefits, because I think that there's a bit of a myth around that. I rattled off some figures at the beginning. about the total welfare bill being £188 billion, but less than £5 billion, or 2.5% of that, is unemployment benefit. And I think people are under the illusion that it all goes to the unemployed. 2.5% of it is unemployment benefits. Now, the reason for that is because unemployment benefits are actually so bloody low, to be frank. But £42 billion of it goes to people on low incomes. So part of the reason why people in work need benefits is because rents are high, we've established that, but it's also because wages are too low. And in a sense, what the government's doing is subsidising wealthy landlords and low-paying employers. And I think there's a real problem there. And just to, we've got a minimum wage now, one of the great achievements of the Labour government. But let's look at it relative internationally. The minimum wage is worth 46% of average earnings in the UK. In France, their minimum wage is worth 60% of average earnings. In New Zealand, it's 59%. In Canada, 56%. In Australia and Belgium, it's 52%. So it's higher in other places. And this is my favourite myth, and it is the final one I'll talk about, is benefit fraud. And I want to just, again, listen to the language this government uses. And there's a common theme. I think these might have been written by the same person. Welfare Minister Chris Grayling said he was concerned about people who sit at home on benefits doing nothing. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, people sitting on their sofas waiting for their benefits. Obviously, hasn't tried claiming them recently. There's good luck with that. Chancellor George Osborne, people who think it's a lifestyle to sit on out-of-work benefit. I mean, I don't know, it's sort of sponsored by DFS, this sitting sofa men going on. Unbelievable. But on Thursday this week, handily enough, the government published new figures on benefit fraud. It's £1.1 billion a year. That's the government's estimate of how much is being defrauded from the system. What they don't tell you, and a figure you never hear, and that's because they don't publish it, is the amount of benefits that are unclaimed every year. This is benefits that people are entitled to, but they're not getting. It's £16 billion. That is money that could be stimulating the economy, should be in people's pockets. And of course, let's not just stop there. Let's talk about tax evasion, £70 billion a year. Tax avoidance by the super rich and big business, £25 billion a year. So why is there such an intense vilification of the welfare state today? Apart from the fact they're trying to ram through cuts. And I think part of it is the language we use now. We talk about the welfare state. Beveridge didn't talk about that, and neither did the post-war Labour government. They talked about social security. They talked about social insurance. National insurance was something you paid to insure yourself against it. So this idea that all the politicians talk about that is something for nothing culture. It's not something for nothing. I paid national insurance. I paid it so that if I lose my job, if I'm incapacitated, if I can't afford housing, that's what I get. That's why I pay my taxes. And I also think we've lost something from the welfare state, and that was the policy of the post-war Labour government for full employment. Because you can't have that sort of welfare state without full employment. And between the 1940s and 1978, unemployment in this country never rose above 1 million people. Today it's 2.6 million, with another 1.3 million people in part-time work because they can't get a full-time job, and another 600,000 in temporary jobs who want a full-time permanent job. Now, I don't want to get too academic on you because it doesn't suit me, you're exposing me as a fraud if I try. But Nietzsche, the German philosopher, sounds tenuous, but bear with it. He said that man had killed God. He said Christianity was dead, but belief in the sickness which it taught and propagated continues to exist. And I don't wish to be, I forgot my surroundings for a minute there, probably shouldn't say that. But what he meant is that people had stopped believing in God, but they still believed in sin, but they with no belief in a cure for it. And listening to Ian Duncan Smith, I think it's a similar scenario about welfare. He says the system developed to help the most vulnerable and support people in times of need is trapping people in a cycle of dependency. Well, it is, Ian. It is trapping them in a cycle of dependency because there aren't the jobs, and your government isn't taking any responsibility for that. And to be fair, consecutive governments haven't. And today they're attacking it. They're cutting £30 billion from welfare, but at the same time they're giving tax breaks to business worth £30 billion. Now that's seems to be a happy coincidence there. What they're doing is redistributing money from welfare to large shareholders. That seems fairly ruthless to me. So let me just come back to where I started from, which is how do we tackle the welfare bill in a socially just way? Firstly, we invest to create a job. Now a big part of that could be to build the council housing we so urgently need, create millions of jobs, get people off unemployment benefit. But then be paying tax, of course, which we could then use to fund better benefits. And because and we could raise the minimum wage so that we're not subsidising bad employers paying people a low wage. It's pretty simple, really, but we need to get that message through to this government.